Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. And do you know what this campaign has been missing? Tory Sleaze scandals. And it seems the Tories are in generous mood because as we wait for Labour's manifesto launch, although it will be out by the time this video goes out, there's been another couple of sleaze and corruption stories breaking in the news. The news reported that someone has been arrested by the National Crime Agency in connection with the PPE fraud investigation, which involves Michelle Mone and Doug Barrowman, though they were not the ones arrested. But also that Rishi Sunak's closest parliamentary aide put a bet on the election date just 3 days before the election was called. So let's begin with the illegal betting, because that is the only one of the two stories to feature on any of the newspaper front pages today, as well as the BBC News homepage. Craig Williams, Principal Private Secretary to the Prime Minister, so is in constant contact with Rishi Sunak. According to reports, 3 days before Sunak called the election, Williams placed a £100 bet on a July election at odds of 5-1. Williams has admitted this, by the way. Now, at the very least, he would have known that Sunak was leaning into a decision to call the election for July, and it's actually more likely that he would have known for certain at this time. The insider knowledge would make this an illegal bet. The reason this has come to light is because he is what is known as politically exposed, the term you may have heard when we were discussing Nigel Farage and his banking woes a while ago. So as a result of that, the bet was automatically referred to the Gambling Commission, who are launching an investigation. Now, Williams, as I say, he's admitted it. He's trying to downplay it, trying to make out it was an innocent mistake, going, I should have realised how it would look. Yeah, probably shouldn't have done that. It's like, what do you mean you should have known how it would look? I'll tell you how it looks, mate. It looks like someone who is in constant contact with the Prime Minister, the man who decides when the election is going to take place, putting a bet on when the election is going to take place 3 days before that election was called. That's what it looks like. Sunak was told a week ago that his PPS was being investigated. So he had time at that point to say, oh, this isn't a very good look. Yeah, I'm going to have to drop you as a candidate and replace you, because that was before the deadline for candidates. And yet he chose to let him carry on. So Sunak could have taken action without harming his party's chances and didn't. This now reflects on his character and judgment. Remember when Sunak promised to bring integrity to government? This is just the latest example of how dishonest that claim was. It's actually, I mean, if you think about it, it's worth noting that there's every chance that the next round of MRP polls, which I am now eagerly awaiting, will show that Williams could be removed if people vote tactically against him in Montgomeryshire and Glyndwr. So it's quite generous of the Tories if you think about it. They're giving us more and more motivation to vote tactically against them, really, aren't they? And of course, let's say he does win his seat. So in the last MRP polls, it looked like he would just about win it, unless there was a lot of tactical voting. It's possible there will not now need to be as much tactical voting because of the events of last week. But let's say he does win his seat. There would then inevitably be an investigation in the next Parliament. Might actually be a privileges investigation because it's linked to his role as a minister. That could result in a suspension and then a recall petition. And let's say he only just won his seat. So then you could imagine that recall petition may well succeed. So if he wants to remain an MP, it's actually possible he might have to fight his seat twice in 1 year. Which makes you wonder why he did it. Like, why did he commit an illegal act which could also see him lose his seat in Parliament, his seat on the gravy train, when all he stood to gain was £500? It sounds mad. And the only conclusion I can draw is that, like many Tories, he probably didn't see it as a problem. Like, he won't have seen it as doing anything wrong. You know, he was just taking advantage of his position. He probably thought like it was a perk of the job or something. You know, the entitlement. And so, anyway, on to the next scandal involving the entitled, on a way higher level than this betting scandal, of course. This is really an ongoing scandal. So the abuses of the so-called VIP lane, in not only funneling lots of public money into the bank accounts of people with close connections to the Tories, but it also meant we didn't always get the vital medical equipment needed at the height of the pandemic. Because that was what was particularly galling. People have died, people have developed long-term illnesses as a direct result of the NHS and care homes not being able to get the life-saving PPE they needed. It was stupid as well, politically. Our economic situation has been made predictably worse because the government spent more public money than was strictly necessary for what they got with these over-generous contracts to certain groups and people. And they are paying the electoral price for that now. And it has to be said that for the Tories particularly, instigating policies which were inevitably going to lead to the excess deaths of lots of elderly people is not the greatest strategy to develop when pretty much all of your voters are elderly. They really are the scorpion on the frog, aren't they? They can't help themselves. But the National Crime Agency, they've been investigating one particular contract with a company called PPE MedPro. This is a company which did not exist before the pandemic. It suddenly sprang up when the VIP lane did. Michelle Mone and her husband Doug Barrowman are strongly connected to it. Mone initially denied connections but has since admitted she was lying. She's had to admit she's lying because there's now a criminal investigation, and it really doesn't do to tell an easily provable lie when you're being investigated for a serious crime. Homes and offices have been raided, but the investigation is just dragging on and on. It's been going on for 3 years now. But a 46-year-old man has now been arrested in connection with the investigation, so it would appear that the investigation is still proceeding and that new evidence is still being turned over. And I suppose if there is an advantage in this investigation taking so long, it is this. If the net finally does start closing properly around those at the top of this scheme, they will not be able to elicit any favours from the government. It will also mean there could well be public pressure for the, what will be at the time, Labour government to ask, well, what about the others? Why aren't there investigations into others? And Labour will not be in the slightest bit interested in trying to cover for the others. They're Tory donors and friends. I also hope that the NCA will be able to pursue other cases. Because like Mone and Barrowman, they often complain that they're being singled out. And that is actually true. It is true because there are others in their situation. And I think the reason they're being singled out is because they drew attention to themselves. But there were others in the same boat, some of whom were ministers at the time. Matt Hancock, he gave a contract to a company in which he had a stake. It made me wonder if these would be the final Tory Sleaze stories of their 14 years in power. The stories will keep coming, of course they will. But once they're no longer the government, it should be harder to get away with them. There could arguably be less motivation to run these sort of corruption schemes in the first place, especially when some of them are potentially criminal in nature, as is the case here, far too risky for them. But maybe these will be the last to drop before we get that change of government, because they've only got 3 more weeks to drop any more. Then if anyone wants to write a book on all the Tory sleaze scandals of the period, which puts those of the 1990s, let's be honest, into the shade. It's quite incredible to think back to 1997 and all the talk was of Tory sleaze. Tory sleaze was like talked about so often, and we don't talk about it now, even though the sleaze and corruption is way worse than anything back then. But if anyone is planning on writing a book on them all, they will be able to sort of finish off in a few weeks. Hopefully they've done all the legwork already, because this could easily be a 12-volume encyclopedia. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.